And so because he's not present, he's not being the leader that he should be, that actually opens the Guardians up to vulnerability.
Disney faces fresh backlash as the Guardians of the Galaxy cast breaks their silence.
So it's a very bittersweet thing.
They're accusing the studio of neglect, betrayal, and emotional fallout.
But, listen, I'm excited for them to go do whatever they want to with Guardians.
What did Disney's CEO do to lose the Guardians cast? And why did one star vow never to return? It all traces back to one explosive decision: the betrayal. You used us. That wasn't a line from a script. That was the sentiment, spoken and unspoken, boiling to the surface from the Guardians of the Galaxy cast. Behind the jokes, the cosmic action, the box office glory, there was pain, there was resentment, and there was betrayal. Not from fans, not even from critics, but from Disney itself. And more specifically, from Bob Iger, the studio's once-hailed kingmaker, turned out-of-touch executive titan. And now, the cast has had enough. But first, let's be clear. This isn't just about a trilogy ending. This is about corporate betrayal, broken trust, and the sheer arrogance of one of the most powerful media CEOs in history. Because while Disney was laying off 7,000 employees, Bob Iger doubled his own pay to $31.6 million. That includes over $26 million in stock and bonuses, while the company lost billions in streaming and box office flops. Meanwhile, the people who carried Disney's franchises on their backs, like Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, were being silently pushed aside, stonewalled during contract talks, and humiliated publicly. This is the story Disney didn't want out. The unraveling started subtly. After Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3, the cast hit the media circuit, but sharp viewers noticed a growing edge to their interviews.
You know, going up to Chris and going, just don't suck this time. Do it again, but suck less.
That wasn't just a joke. Behind the scenes, many of the cast were exhausted and disillusioned. At the final press junkets, the smiles faltered.
If we can discuss the fact that this is maybe not a franchise that's going to go on forever, how are you feeling?
What? Huh? Talk like that.
How do you feel about the idea of James Gunn and you guys not necessarily being part of the same gang?
I'm against it.
Behind those chuckles was a gut punch, because what most fans didn't know is that the cast never wanted this to be the end. In fact, they had every intention to keep going until Disney cut the legs out from under them. Here's what really happened. During the chaotic years of Disney's pandemic recovery and creative collapse, Bob Iger was brought back to save the company. But instead of revitalizing it, he slashed jobs, gutted budgets, and stopped caring about the artists who made Disney magic. He treated the Marvel franchise like a spreadsheet, not a legacy. And the Guardians? They were just a column marked complete. Actors were shocked when they learned there'd be no future plans for their characters. They found out from trade reports or interviews where Iger downplayed their worth. Just look at what he said during the writers and actors strike.
We wanted to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with the actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they are adding to the set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive.
So they're not being realistic?
No, they're not.
Why not?
I can't answer that question. I respect their right and their desire to get as much as they possibly can in compensation for their people.
He said writers and actors weren't realistic, even as he collected a paycheck that could fund indie studios. The Guardians cast noticed. Chris Pratt suddenly went radio silent on Marvel. Dave Bautista said he wouldn't return as Drax. Insiders say it was about respect. Zoe Saldana took the high road, but never mentioned Disney in her goodbye posts. Let's talk about James Gunn, the man who made this franchise. He was fired in 2018 after right-wing smear campaigns weaponized decade-old tweets. Disney dropped him immediately. No meeting, no due process. Who stood by him? The entire Guardians cast. They risked their careers with a unified statement, and it worked. Disney rehired Gunn, but the damage was done. Gunn never forgot, neither did the cast. When Warner Brothers offered him the DC universe, he didn't hesitate. Yet Iger portrayed himself as the unifier.
I obviously have deep passion for the company and the business, and I care a lot about the people. After coming back, realized that the company was facing a number of challenges, some self-inflicted, some caused by changes in the business, large-scale disruption of certain parts of the business. And while a lot of work has been accomplished in the 7 or so months that I've been back, the board believed, and I agreed with them, that there was a lot more work to do.
Yes, self-inflicted. That part he got right. Because Disney's issues weren't just about shifting markets or streaming woes. They were about a failure of leadership. Iger's strategy pulled back from creative risk, watered down stories, and forced departments into compliance. Directors lost power. Actors were no longer collaborators. They were line items. Even the Guardians' farewell tour was cheapened. Sources say the cast was given strict talking points, told not to mention the strike or future projects. A celebration situation on a leash, and fans noticed. One wrote on Reddit, "It's so obvious the cast didn't want it to end. Disney burned them. This is why the Guardians cast has begun to rebel, not with lawsuits, but with pointed words, absent endorsements, and silence. In Hollywood, silence is louder than any statement. Now that silence is turning into a roar. Let's rewind. The Guardians franchise was never a sure thing. These weren't A-list characters. That's what made the journey authentic. It wasn't about IP. It was about family. Disney's boardroom didn't just fire Gunn. They condemned him without consulting the cast. Over a decade of loyalty tossed in a press release. In an unprecedented move, they signed an open letter demanding Gunn be reinstated. Chris Pratt shared it directly on Instagram, stating that while they did not defend his jokes, they were standing up for the man they knew. Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, Karen Gillan, they all risked future roles to defend him. That act of loyalty should have built trust between the cast and the studio, but instead, it put a target on their backs. Insiders at the time told The Hollywood Reporter that several of the Guardians cast were quietly blacklisted from further negotiation meetings after the letter. Dave Bautista later admitted that he felt nauseated working for Disney after the firing, calling the decision cowardly. He was vocal, and Disney noticed. Fast forward to 2023, the cast returns for Vol 3, knowing it's the end. They showed up, they gave their all, but they weren't celebrating, they were mourning. Zoe Saldana praised Gunn. She thanked fans. But when asked about Disney, she said nothing. Insiders say Zoe wasn't supposed to exit the franchise. Talks were happening. But when Gunn moved to DC, Disney quietly shelved character-driven Marvel Plus projects. The pipeline was clogged, Iger said, so they pulled back. Translation? You're no longer valuable. Even Bradley Cooper, who voiced Rocket and brought emotional depth to what could have been a punchline character, never got a standalone project. There was a pitch, there was concept art, and then it vanished. Let's not forget Pom Klementieff, Mantis. Her performance in the holiday special was lauded. Critics called her a comedic revelation. Fans begged for more. Disney gave her nothing. Why? Because none of them fit Iger's vision for profitability. A vision that's increasingly cold, calculated, and sanitized. This isn't speculation. It's a pattern Iger himself outlined in an interview. We ended up taxing our people, Marvel increased their movie output, made a number of television series, and frankly, it diluted focus and attention. Notice what's missing? Responsibility. These weren't creative failures. They were corporate mandates. Volume over value, content over connection. And the result? Burnout, resentment, and the quiet dismantling of the most beloved franchise of the MCU's second era. But it wasn't just the cast that saw through the facade. Even James Gunn, ever the diplomat, took subtle jabs at the studio during interviews. One in particular stood out.
You have to know how to sort of ooze your way through things in a kind way.
That's what it all comes down to.
A kind way of saying, this system is broken, but I'm playing nice. The collapse. Let's make one thing clear. What happened to the Guardians wasn't isolated. It was part of a much bigger internal breakdown, a slow-motion implosion inside Marvel Studios. And Disney itself, ignited by greed, micromanagement, and sheer creative exhaustion. And at the center of that collapse, Bob Iger. Now that might sound dramatic, but once you see how deliberate this unraveling was, and how it blindsided even the most loyal cast members, you'll understand why we're calling this a betrayal. Because the cast didn't just lose a franchise, they lost their future, their creative agency, and in some cases, their voice. This was a civil war, quiet but brutal. So what do you do when a studio betrays you? If you're a regular employee, you might file a complaint, maybe call a lawyer. But when you're the cast of Marvel's most human franchise, and the betrayal runs deep, you go to war. Not with fists, not with lawsuits, but with something far more damaging, truth. This is the story of how the Guardians of the Galaxy stars, once considered Disney's most loyal, most marketable faces, staged a quiet rebellion, one fueled by withheld scripts, suspicious rewrites, internal memos, and back-channel conversations that pitted Marvel Studios against its own parent company. And it all starts with James Gunn's second firing. Wait, what second firing? Let's clarify. Gunn was officially reinstated in 2019 after being fired in 2018 over controversial tweets. Disney, under massive public pressure and with Marvel boss Kevin Feige reportedly lobbying hard, reversed their decision. Gunn was back, or so it seemed. But here's the truth you didn't hear. According to several insiders cited in a 2023 expose by Puck News, Gunn's creative authority was never fully restored. Behind the scenes, Bob Iger and upper Disney management installed new layers of oversight around Guardians Vol 3, quietly slashing the budget, limiting his final cut control, and even mandating a streaming compatibility clause for certain scenes in case they were chopped up for future content repurposing. Yes, you read that right. They planned ahead to slice up his film into streaming content before it was even done. By the time Gunn returned, his set was surrounded by watchers, studio reps, streaming execs, brand managers. Their presence was quiet, but always there. One crew member allegedly said they called them the Shadows. Gunn himself never publicly condemned Disney for this, but in his Empire interview, he implied as much. He said he was allowed to finish Volume 3 his way, but noted it was the hardest shoot of his career. One comment stuck out. When you're making a movie with people you trust, it's a joy. When you're making one with people who don't trust you, it's a grind. And here's where things get darker. The cast didn't know Volume 3 was the last one until after it was shot. They suspected, of course. Gunn had been open about wanting to move on, but most assumed Disney would spin off characters like Mantis, Rocket, Nebula, or even Kraglin into new shows, especially with the explosion of Disney Plus content. Instead, they were met with silence. When Chris Pratt asked about Star-Lord's future, he got a vague, "We'll see." When Palm Clementieff asked if Mantis could get a limited series, the pitch never left the room. Karen Gillan, who transformed Nebula from a background villain to one of the MCU's most emotionally complex characters, was offered nothing, not even a cameo commitment. They were being phased out, and it wasn't because they weren't beloved. It was because they were expensive. According to insiders at The Wrap, Disney was under immense pressure from investors to cut aging legacy costs post-COVID. That meant fewer multi-film deals, fewer back-end bonuses, more flexible contracts with newer, cheaper actors. You know who became the model? Jonathan Majors? Yes, that Jonathan Majors. But more on that chaos in a different story. So Disney quietly pulled back. They deprioritized Guardians characters in the next MCU phases, and when the cast found out, all hell broke loose. But that wasn't all. After Gunn announced he would be heading to DC as co-head of their new cinematic universe, the internal atmosphere at Marvel Studios became toxic. Writers reported abrupt cancellations of upcoming treatments, staffers were told to stop referencing Guardians IP, and cast representatives were informed that no further spin-offs are currently greenlit, no matter what was being discussed publicly. This was corporate retaliation, and it set off a ripple effect across the cast, many of whom felt they were being punished for supporting Gunn in the first place. Take Dave Bautista. The man who played Drax was perhaps the loudest critic of Disney during Gunn's first firing, but after the trilogy ended, he got ice-cold silence. Despite expressing interest in continuing in a smaller, more dramatic role, Bautista was reportedly told by a Disney executive that Drax doesn't fit the evolving tone of the brand. And Dave Bautista? He'd already made up his mind. He said it plainly. During interviews for Knock at the Cabin, "I'm so grateful for Drax, but I don't want Drax to be my legacy." Read between the lines. What he meant was, Disney doesn't care about Drax anymore, and they sure as hell don't care about Dave. Chris Pratt reportedly confronted an exec after a press day in London, asking why he had to find out from fan speculation that Star-Lord wouldn't return. According to one source close to the set, he said, "You're Disney, not a podcast. Call me." And the most gutting moment? When James Gunn wrapped the final day of shooting, there wasn't a single studio executive there to say goodbye. No Feige, no Iger, just crew, cast, and a few exhausted producers. That was the moment it really hit them. It was over. Not because the story had ended, but because the studio had moved on. And the hypocrisy? That same week, Bob Iger was on CNBC, praising the enduring power of the Marvel brand. He said,
I'm extremely optimistic about the company and its assets, and we should talk about them.
We will.
But I would say that in some cases the challenges are greater than I had anticipated.
Translation, we're in trouble, but we'll use nostalgia to stay afloat. That nostalgia, it came from Guardians, from Rocket's trauma, from Groot's sacrifice, from Nebula's pain, from every improvised line, every ad-libbed laugh, every moment that wasn't even in the script, but came from the cast's connection to each other. You want to know how much Disney valued that? They made more marketing material around the Baby Rocket plush toy than they did for Karen Gillan's final performance. More tweets for a raccoon than for a woman who spent 6 hours in prosthetics every day to deliver some of the MCU's most emotionally devastating lines. But the betrayal didn't stop at marketing. Behind the scenes, a shocking revelation emerged. Disney had plans to recast Rocket and Groot entirely, using AI. That's right. In a now infamous investor call leak, execs discussed cost-saving measures for voice performance, suggesting that future iterations of Rocket could be AI-assisted based on legacy recordings. Bradley Cooper? Not needed. Vin Diesel? Out. The fans would never know, they said. That idea, thankfully, was shelved after the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes made AI ethics a nuclear issue. But the fact that Disney considered it shows just how little respect they had for the very voices that made the Guardians beloved. And it didn't stop there. Even James Gunn had to fight tooth and nail to keep certain scenes intact. According to him, Disney execs pushed back on the more emotional elements of Rocket's backstory, calling it too dark for the brand. This is the same brand that owns Hulu, FX, and Deadpool. But now they were suddenly extremely squeamish about a raccoon with trauma? Here's what Gunn said about that moment. I was told at one point to cut a scene because it might be off-putting. I said, if that's off-putting, then the audience needs to be off-put. The scene stayed, but the message was clear. Guardians was now the exception, not the rule. And after Volume 3, there would be no more exceptions. And that brings us to the final revelation. The reason the cast hasn't spoken out more publicly, despite the heartbreak, the broken promises, the goodbyes said through gritted teeth, is simple. They legally can't. Buried in their press contracts are non-disparagement clauses that restrict them from criticizing the studio for up to 5 years after their final appearance. Even Pom Klementieff, in her final interviews, seemed to hint at the heartbreak.
It's sad because, you know, it's such a beautiful story. We love our characters and we love, you know, playing together, but...
But all things must come to an end.
Notice what she didn't say? She never said she wanted it to end. So where was Disney during all this? Bob Iger was doing interviews, mocking the writers' strike, claiming actors had unrealistic expectations for fair compensation, even as he collected a $31.6 million paycheck for presiding over the collapse of the most valuable IP in entertainment history.
You know, being realistic is imperative.
What do you
here.
do in the interim? Does AI
Well,
start to
it
write a
sets
lot
a-
of scripts?
It will have a very, very damaging effect on the whole business, and
The
unfortunately,
strike will.
there's huge collateral damage in the industry. The people
The irony? The only ones being realistic were the Guardians cast, who saw the iceberg coming and tried to steer the ship before it was too late. And now, they're moving on, but not quietly. Chris Pratt is producing his own content now, with more control. Karen Gillan is directing indie films. Dave Bautista is breaking out in award-winning dramas. Zoe Saldana is back in Avatar and working with studios that respect her voice. And James Gunn? He's building his own cinematic universe, one where actors, writers, and stories come first. Because they learned the hard way, you can't save a galaxy from a boardroom. Disney was preparing for blowback. They knew how this would look. They knew what they did. And they wrote up contracts to make sure nobody could say it. But now, they don't need to, because the silence speaks for itself. The Reckoning. The final Guardians film hit theaters with emotional fanfare. Audiences cried, critics applauded, social media erupted with praise for what many called the most heartfelt MCU finale since Endgame. But inside the Disney boardrooms, there was silence. Not celebration, not gratitude, silence. Because by the time Fall 3 premiered, the decision had already been made. The Guardians were done, permanently. Not just the trilogy, not just the characters, the entire brand. And Disney never told the cast. According to an insider report from Deadline, the company had internal discussions as early as 2022 about sunsetting the Guardians property. The documents referenced a phase-down strategy that would retire non-core IPs with limited merchandise potential. Guardians of the Galaxy, an Oscar-nominated billion-dollar trilogy, was filed under non-core. Why? Because Disney doesn't care about storytelling. It cares about ownership, about shelf space, about control. And with James Gunn now running DC Studios, the Guardians property, his property, was now seen as contaminated. The internal directive? No further development unless creator returns or rights revert. Translation? He left. Burn it down. One Disney executive, quoted anonymously in a Hollywood Reporter column, allegedly said, "We don't need them anymore. Just let that sit. The cast that gave you Rocket's trauma, Quill's grief, Nebula's redemption, Groot's sacrifice, Mantis's light, Drax's fatherhood. We don't need them anymore. That wasn't a business decision. That was a dismissal of legacy." And the cast? They found out the same way fans did, through leaks. Not phone calls, not letters, just whispers from agents and silent withdrawals from the studio side. Chris Pratt, once the golden boy of Marvel, was reportedly blindsided. He had pitched a limited series featuring Star-Lord's return to Earth, exploring his roots in grief. The idea was quietly passed up the ladder and buried. No reply. Karen Gillan had been approached by fans and journalists alike about a Nebula miniseries. She was excited, hopeful. Then she was told through a third-party rep that Marvel is pausing all ancillary development. Dave Bautista? His calls stopped getting returned after he posted a tweet in 2023 calling for better actor pay. He later said, "I'm okay leaving. I just wish they'd told us it would be like this." Because no one got closure, except Bob Iger. While the Guardians cast were saying goodbye to a decade of storytelling, he was renegotiating his own contract extension. He cited unfinished work and the need for continuity. What he didn't mention? That under his leadership, Disney had gutted the very continuity that built its empire. The Guardians were more than a team. They were the soul of the MCU, the only franchise that told stories about pain, family, healing, and trauma without drowning in cynicism. And Disney shelved it like a tax write-off. And And then the NDAs came. According to an insider report in late 2023, Marvel actors involved in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise received revised non-disparagement agreements. Several were re-upped for internal policy reasons, including clauses about discussing studio development practices, compensation negotiations, streaming rights, creative disagreements. Why issue new NDAs after the trilogy had wrapped? Because Disney was preparing for fallout. They knew the cast was upset. They knew the fan community was demanding answers. So they did what corporations do best when caught burning bridges. They lawyered up, but that didn't stop the truth. Multiple sources close to the cast confirmed that a private group chat, which included the main Guardian stars and James Gunn, remained active long after the press tour ended. And in that chat, they shared article links, fan tributes, and above all, support. They were more than co-workers. They were a family, one forged in fire and betrayal. In one particularly raw message, leaked anonymously by a Disney insider, a cast member reportedly wrote, "They didn't fire us. They forgot we were real." And that might be the single line that defines this entire saga. Because Disney, in its race to turn storytelling into content and artists into algorithms, forgot the very thing that made the Guardians resonate with millions. They felt real. Not because of CGI, not because of box office math, but because we believed them. When Rocket wept for his friends, when Quill screamed in grief, when Groot said, "We are Groot," we believed them. And now, the actors who gave us those moments are being treated like liabilities, like line items, like footnotes. Bob Iger can talk about restructuring all he wants, but what he dismantled wasn't just a franchise. He dismantled trust. And fans, they're not buying it anymore. Just go to any Reddit thread, YouTube comment, or fan forum. The message is the same. We didn't want this to be the end, but if it is, then let it be a warning. A warning that even the most beloved characters can be tossed aside. That even billion-dollar loyalty can be erased with one memo. That the mouse doesn't remember your name once you leave the park. And in the end, that message wasn't destroyed by a villain on screen. It was dismantled by a corporation that didn't know what it had. Or worse, didn't care. If you enjoyed this video, click any of the cards on your screen to check out more content.
Yeah.
It's almost terrifying to think about things being done.
Chris Evans has just opened up about something going on at Disney, and honestly, it's got people worried. For a while now, there have been whispers about drama unfolding behind the scenes, things never meant for the public eye. But hearing it from one of the studio's biggest stars, that hits different. So what exactly is going on? Chris Evans drops a bombshell about Disney. The world of Disney has been no stranger to controversies, particularly when it comes to the 2022 Pixar film Lightyear. At the center of this storm stands Chris Evans, who voiced the titular character in what was meant to be the origin story of the beloved Space Ranger. The film was positioned as the movie that inspired the toy in the Toy Story universe, an interesting meta concept that added layers to the Pixar mythology. However, when Lightyear hit theaters in June 2022, it sparked immediate and intense backlash, primarily due to the inclusion of a brief same-sex kiss between two female characters. This scene, lasting only about 10 seconds and appearing in a montage sequence depicting the life of Hawthorne, voiced by Uzo Aduba, and her wife, caused the film to be banned in 14 countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other nations in the Middle East and Asia, where homosexuality is often criminalized or heavily restricted under local media content standards and cultural norms. The international censorship of Lightyear highlighted the ongoing challenges of global film distribution, particularly for content that pushes boundaries on social issues or includes LGBTQ+ representation. Producer Galen Sussman told AFP that the team was warned of potential bans but chose not to alter the film, stating, "We weren't going to change the film we wanted to make just because of some countries with, for lack of a better term, backward beliefs." This stance reflected a growing willingness among some filmmakers and studios to prioritize inclusive storytelling over maximizing global box office potential, a complex business decision with significant cultural implications. Evans made headlines when he boldly addressed this controversy head-on. In an interview with Reuters that quickly went viral, he didn't mince words about those criticizing the film's LGBTQ+ representation, stating, "The real truth is those people are idiots." The actor's unfiltered response was remarkable for its directness, especially coming from the star of a Disney Pixar family film. Most actors promoting such projects tend to respond to controversies with carefully worded diplomatic statements, but Evans chose a more confrontational approach that aligned with his personal values, while potentially risking alienating certain audience segments. The actor went on to elaborate on his position regarding social progress, framing the issue as part of a broader historical pattern of societal advancement.
I mean, I think throughout history you can see every time there's been social advancement as we wake up. I mean, the American story, the human story is one of constant social awakening and growth, and that's what makes us good.
This framing situated the Lightyear controversy within a larger narrative of American and human progress, suggesting that resistance to diverse representation is not only wrong-headed, but part of a historical pattern that ultimately gives way to greater inclusivity. Evans's choice to contextualize the film's representation in these sweeping historical terms elevated the discussion beyond a single scene in an animated movie, connecting it to fundamental questions about social evolution and progress. What's particularly interesting about Evans's stance is how firmly he planted his flag in support of inclusion, even as Disney was navigating its own internal controversies regarding LGBTQ+ content. Before the film's release, the same-sex kiss scene was initially cut from Lightyear, but was later restored following protests from Pixar staff. This internal conflict at Disney Pixar was part of a broader protest against Disney's response to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, officially the Parental Rights in Education bill, which restricts discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in primary school classrooms. In March 2022, LGBTQ employees and allies at Pixar sent a joint statement to Disney leadership, claiming that Disney executives had censored overtly gay affection in films, highlighting years of thwarted efforts to include LGBTQ+ identity in their projects. The statement detailed specific examples, including the removal of a rainbow sticker from Soul 2020 and same-sex couples from various backgrounds in films, illustrating the tension between creative desires for representation and corporate concerns about market reception. Evans continued his criticism of those opposing the film's representation, predicting their eventual irrelevance in increasingly stark terms.
And, you know, when that happens, there's always going to be people who are afraid and unaware and trying to hold on to what was before. But those people die off like dinosaurs. And so, you know, I think the goal is to pay them no mind, march forward, and embrace the growth that makes us human.
The dinosaurs metaphor was particularly pointed, comparing critics of inclusive representation to extinct creatures unable to adapt to a changing world. This vivid language underscored Evans's conviction that opposition to diversity and representation represents not just a difference of opinion, but a fundamentally outdated worldview destined for extinction. Such rhetoric, while galvanizing for those who share his perspective, undoubtedly intensified the polarized reaction to both the film and Evans' comments. The actor's co-star in the interview echoed these sentiments with their own powerful statement, urging critics to re-examine their perspectives through the lens of the film's famous catchphrase.
I would say to those people, just like with Buzz, like, you know, refurbish your idea of tradition. You know, understand that it's to infinity and beyond. It's time to move forward. It's time to accept and look and you know, enjoy all the faces that have always been there. You know what I mean? They've always been a part of the picture. You just try to like paint them out. So that's also what this is about. It's about this is what it looks like. This is what it's always been, and yeah, to infinity and beyond.
This creative incorporation of Buzz Lightyear's signature phrase, "to infinity and beyond," transformed it from a space exploration metaphor into a call for social progress, cleverly linking the film's theme of pushing boundaries with the real-world push for greater inclusivity and representation. The controversy surrounding Lightyear didn't end with its representation issues. There was also significant discussion about the casting of Chris Evans instead of Tim Allen, who had voiced Buzz Lightyear in all 4 Toy Story films. This decision led to fan disappointment and speculation about whether Allen had been passed over for political reasons, given his conservative views and public support for Donald Trump. Some fans and media outlets theorized that Allen's absence was due to his political stance, noting incidents like a 2013 controversy involving racial slurs, adding another layer of political tension to the film's reception. Evans addressed this casting controversy directly, explaining in interviews that Lightyear depicted the human character who inspired the toy, not the toy itself, which justified the different voice casting. In an interview with Jimmy Kimmel, he further clarified the premise of the film, describing his initial confusion and the explanation he received from director Angus MacLane.
So, listen, I'm a massive Pixar fan, and when my team first called me to tell me that this was a possibility, when you get a call...
Which team, the Celtics, you mean?
Sorry, God, that was like the most Hollywood thing. When my team called, you know, my agents.
Yeah.
And when everybody's on the call, you know it's either good news or really bad.
Oh, right.
Evans went on to explain the concept behind the film, revealing how the director's childhood fascination with Star Wars informed the creative vision for Lightyear.
And I went up and I met with them, and Angus, the director, had a PowerPoint presentation, and it began by him saying, so when I was a kid, I love Star Wars. And click, the first slide was, 5-year-old Angus covered in Han Solo gear. And he said it was just his whole world. He had all the toys and his friends loved it. And he said that when he first saw the first Toy Story, and when Andy got Buzz Lightyear and all his friends knew who Buzz was, he wondered what was the movie in their world that they saw that made Buzz such an iconic...
This explanation positioned Lightyear as a meta-narrative within the Pixar universe, the fictional movie that existed within the world of Toy Story that inspired the Buzz Lightyear toy line. This creative concept sought to justify both the visual differences between the animated human Buzz and the toy Buzz, as well as the voice casting change from Allen to Evans. Tim Allen himself weighed in on the controversy in an interview with Extra, commenting on the lack of connection between Lightyear and his portrayal of the character. "It's a wonderful story, it just doesn't seem to have any connection to the toy. It's a little, I don't know, it just has no relationship to Buzz. It's just no connection. I wish there was a better connection." Allen's remarks, while not directly critical, suggested a disappointment with how the character had been reimagined, adding fuel to the existing controversy about his absence from the project. Despite the explanations offered by Evans and the creative team, the casting controversy added another layer of political tension to the film's reception. Some conservative commentators and fans saw Allen's absence as part of a pattern of Hollywood sidelining performers with right-leaning views, while others accepted the creative explanation at face value. This division reflected the increasingly polarized nature of media reception in contemporary American culture, where casting decisions and creative choices are often interpreted through political lenses. Despite the controversies, or perhaps partly because of them, Lightyear underperformed significantly at the box office. Reports indicate that the film lost Disney a substantial $106 million, with a production cost of $373 million, including marketing and distribution, and global box office earnings of only $26.4 million. This financial disappointment led to further criticism and analysis, with some attributing the failure to the film's perceived woke agenda, and others pointing to factors like the confusing premise, the absence of Tim Allen, or simply the quality of the film itself. Conservative backlash against the film was significant and vocal. Representative Jim Jordan expressed his views on Twitter with the succinct critique, "Buzz Lightyear went woke, the movie went broke," encapsulating the go woke, go broke sentiment that has become a common refrain among critics of progressive content in entertainment. Right-wing podcast host Ben Shapiro elaborated on this position on social media, claiming that Disney has a not at all secret gay agenda and encouraging parents to consider this before taking their children to see Lightyear. He included a screenshot of the lesbian couple from the film to emphasize his point, drawing attention specifically to the representation that Evans had defended as a natural part of human progress. The backlash extended beyond social media commentary to concrete actions. A school in Ontario, Canada, canceled a planned field trip to see the film, and a theater in Oklahoma announced its intention to fast forward through the kiss scene during screenings. These responses demonstrated how the brief scene had become a flashpoint for broader cultural tensions about representation in children's media and parental control over the content their children consume. The controversy around Lightyear continues to be a point of discussion, even in 2025, with recent social media posts still referencing it alongside other Disney projects as examples of woke flops. In April 2025, user at BigPoppage68 commented on X, "But at Disney is bleeding money from woke flops like Buzz Lightyear and the Snow White remake. We should quit pretending it's not a problem." This suggests that the film's legacy and the discussions it sparked about representation in media continue to resonate in cultural conversations years after its release, becoming part of a larger narrative about Disney's creative direction and its commercial consequences. Not all reactions to the controversy were negative, however. Some commentators mockingly criticized the intensity of the backlash, drawing parallels to other cultural flashpoints. In April 2025, user at Sammy Wrestlin noted on X, "They literally couldn't sleep at night because a mermaid was black. They stormed a capitol. They never admitted defeat. They also almost killed everyone in their way when there was 2 women kissing in the Lightyear movie. Their snowflakery knows no bounds." This satirical take characterized the backlash as disproportionate and politically motivated, connecting it to other instances of conservative outrage over diverse casting and representation. At this point, it's clear that Evans's stance placed him squarely on one side of a cultural debate that extends far beyond a single animated film. His willingness to call critics idiots and predict their extinction like dinosaurs demonstrated a level of conviction that set him apart from the more measured corporate responses typical of Disney-affiliated talent. Whether this bold stance has affected his relationship with the entertainment giant remains to be seen, but it certainly cemented his reputation as an advocate for progressive values in an increasingly polarized media landscape. Disney scandals rock the entertainment world. While Chris Evans' comments about Lightyear critics generated significant buzz, they represent just one facet of Disney's recent controversies. The entertainment giant has been navigating a sea of scandals that extend far beyond the casting and content choices of a single Pixar film. One of the most alarming recent incidents occurred in early 2025, when former Disney employee Michael Schur was sentenced to 3 years in prison for hacking into the park's menu system after being fired in 2024. This wasn't just digital vandalism, it was a potentially dangerous breach with real-world safety implications. Between July and September 2024, Schur repeatedly hacked into Disney's menu creation software, making various malicious alterations, including changing allergen information, falsely indicating that some items containing peanuts were peanut-free. This could have had life-threatening consequences for visitors with severe allergies had Disney not caught and removed the altered menus before they reached park restaurants. The extent of Schur's digital sabotage was comprehensive. In addition to the allergen misinformation, he changed menu prices, added profane language, disabled employee accounts, and altered QR codes to link to a website advocating a boycott of Israel-related businesses. The incident disrupted operations for 2 weeks, requiring manual processes and backups, and cost Disney at least $150,000 in immediate damages. Schur initially denied wrongdoing, claiming Disney was framing him and citing a mental health disability, but he eventually pleaded guilty to computer fraud and aggravated identity theft. In April 2025, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of approximately $690,000. This incident highlights significant cybersecurity vulnerabilities at one of the world's most visited theme park destinations, raising questions about Disney's digital infrastructure and employee management practices. The case also illustrates the growing intersection of cybersecurity and physical safety in our increasingly digital world. Another ongoing controversy plaguing Disney parks involves the exploitation of the Disability Access Service, DAS, designed to assist guests with disabilities who cannot wait in traditional lines. Reports from May 2025 indicate that some guests are hiring disabled individuals to accompany them and use DAS passes to skip lines, a practice costing approximately $100 for priority access. The practice involves able-bodied guests effectively renting the services of someone with a disability solely to gain preferential treatment in attraction queues. This exploitation not only undermines the purpose of the DAS system, but also commodifies disability in a troubling way. This is not the first time Disney has grappled with such abuse. Similar practices were documented in the early 2010s, leading Disney to replace the guest assistance card with the more structured DAS in 2013. In response to continued exploitation, Disney updated the DAS program again in 2024, narrowing eligibility to focus primarily on developmental disabilities like autism, requiring virtual interviews up to 30 days in advance, and limiting group sizes. However, these policy changes have themselves become controversial. A class action lawsuit filed in February 2025 alleges that the new policies discriminate against guests with physical disabilities, violating their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act and California's Unruh Civil Rights Act. The lawsuit seeks changes to eligibility criteria and damages of at least $4,000 per violation, arguing that the current implementation forces public disclosure of medical information, constituting a privacy breach. Public reaction to the exploitation of the DAS system has been strongly negative. On forums like mumsnet.com, commenters called the hiring practice deceitful and profoundly depressing, with one person noting, "As someone with a disability who now has to jump through ridiculous hoops in Florida, people like your husband are the reason getting the pass I've legitimately used for years is now near impossible." Disney has defended its policies, stating that the claims in the lawsuit are without merit. The company adjusted the wording of its DAS eligibility descriptions in January 2025, removing the word "only" from certain criteria, possibly in response to legal pressures. Beyond operational issues at the parks, Disney has also faced broader controversies related to cultural and political debates. The company's response to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill in 2022 exemplifies this challenge. Disney's initial silence on the legislation led to staff walkouts and public criticism. LGBTQ employees and allies at Pixar alleged that Disney executives had actively censored required overtly gay affection in their films. When Disney eventually opposed the bill after significant pressure, promising $5 million to LGBTQ+ charities and halting political donations in Florida, it faced backlash from conservative stakeholders and politicians. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis responded by targeting Disney's special self-governing status in the Reedy Creek Improvement District, escalating what had been a cultural disagreement into a legal and legislative battle. The controversies surrounding Lightyear are part of a longer history at Pixar and Disney regarding LGBTQ+ representation. Over Pixar's 27-year history, few films have included unambiguous LGBTQ+ characters, with examples like a one-eyed cop mentioning a girlfriend in Onward 2020, and two moms hugging a child in Toy Story 4 Inches 2019. This pattern suggests an ongoing tension between creative desires for inclusive storytelling and business concerns about market reception. The conservative backlash against Disney's perceived woke agenda extends beyond Lightyear. Recent social media comments continue to frame Disney's creative choices in political terms. For instance, the casting decisions for the live-action Snow White remake sparked heated debates in March 2025, illustrating how Disney properties have become battlegrounds in broader cultural wars about representation. In March 2025, another incident added to Disney's challenges when a fire broke out in a walk-in cooler backstage at Epcot's France Pavilion, leading to the evacuation of Remy's Ratatouille adventure. Just days later, a Florida man was arrested for attempting to bring cocaine into Magic Kingdom, generating headlines that associated Disney World with illegal drug activity. As Disney navigates these multifaceted scandals, it faces the challenge of maintaining its identity as a family-friendly entertainment provider while addressing the increasingly diverse and sometimes conflicting expectations of its global audience. The controversies reveal a company at the intersection of changing social norms, technological vulnerabilities, and polarized political environments. Future plans leave fans wondering what next. As controversies continue to swirl around Disney, fans and industry insiders alike are curious about Chris Evans' future with the entertainment giant. Having portrayed both Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Buzz Lightyear in Pixar's Lightyear, Evans has been a significant presence in two major Disney franchises. However, his path forward with the company appears less certain than his past success might suggest. Speculation about Evans returning to the MCU as Captain America has been persistent since his character's emotional send-off in Avengers Endgame 2019. However, recent statements from the actor have consistently denied these rumors. In a January 2025 interview with People magazine, Evans firmly shut down reports of his return for Avengers Doomsday, stating simply, "That's not true," and noting that similar rumors resurface every few years since Endgame. This sentiment was echoed in an Esquire interview where he quipped, "Yeah, no, happily retired," when asked about reprising his role. Anthony Mackie, who has taken up the mantle of Captain America, confirmed in the same piece that Evans had not discussed returning, adding, "I talked to Chris a few weeks ago and it wasn't on the table then." These recent denials stand in contrast to earlier rumors from outlets like Collider in January 2021, which had suggested negotiations for at least one Marvel project, but these have not materialized into confirmed roles. The persistence of these rumors, despite clear denials, highlights the challenge actors face in controlling the narrative around their careers, particularly when attached to beloved franchise characters. Understanding Evans's original journey to becoming Captain America provides interesting context for his current stance. When asked how he got cast in the iconic role, Evans described it as a process filled with uncertainty.
Luck. They wanted me to come in and read, and I was a little apprehensive. It was a back and forth. There was a little bit of a dance. It was something I was really nervous about doing.
He credits the support of Marvel executives and colleagues for helping him take the leap.
Luckily, there were really good people in my corner. They kept nudging me. Kevin Feige, Robert, a lot of great people kind of talked me into it. And best decision of my life.
This initial hesitation, followed by the career-defining success of his tenure as Captain America, may inform his current reluctance to return to the role. Having completed a satisfying character arc and moved on to other projects, Evans may be wary of diminishing the impact of Steve Rogers' farewell by returning for additional appearances. While the MCU door appears closed for now, another potential avenue for Evans' future with Disney lies in the Star Wars franchise. An ex-post from September 2019 shows Evans' interest in joining the galaxy far, far away, as he simply responded "me" to a query about MCU actors in Star Wars. Reports from Giant Freakin' Robot in June 2024, citing insider Daniel Richtman, indicated Disney had informal talks with Evans for an upcoming Star Wars project, likely a theatrical film under Kevin Feige's development. This potential Star Wars connection makes sense given Evans's previous collaboration with Rian Johnson, director of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, on the hit film Knives Out. Earlier reports, like one from Mickey in November 2020, also mentioned talks between Evans and Disney regarding Star Wars, but the lack of updates leaves this possibility in the realm of speculation. In terms of animation work with Disney, Evans' experience with Pixar for Lightyear was both a creative opportunity and a commercial challenge. The film's underperformance at the box office, losing Disney $106 million according to reports, may affect the likelihood of sequels or new Pixar projects involving the actor. While critics praised his performance, there are no indications of sequels or new Pixar projects involving him. When discussing his approach to voicing Buzz Lightyear, Evans revealed his respect for Tim Allen's original performance.
Well, it's nice to have what Tim did, because not only did he do it so well, and we all love him for what his performance was, but the character actually is. I mean, this is the human version of the toys.
He further explained his process.
This is an iconic role, but informed very much in part by what Tim did. Whatever this character is would have to be why Tim is the way he was. So you just kind of take his performance as a blueprint and just move upstream.
Evans also shared insights into the unique challenges of voice acting for animation.
Everyone always says, like, well, what was it like working with the other actors? You don't work with the other actors. You're in a booth by yourself. I didn't even meet half the actors until last night at the premiere. So it's a very isolating thing, and you really end up focusing extremely on the one string you're playing on, which is your voice.
Beyond Disney-specific projects, Evans' current career trajectory includes several non-Disney films. According to the Cinemaholic, as of March 30th, 2025, his upcoming projects include Honey Don't for Apple TV Plus and Red One for Prime Video, suggesting a focus on expanding his presence across different studios and streaming platforms. Evans' contractual status with Disney provides another piece of the puzzle regarding his future with the company. His past MCU contract, detailed in Cinema Blend from 2018, was for 6 films, extended for Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, but expired post-2019. Reports from 2021, like one from We Got This Covered, suggested a new contract for more projects, but these have not led to confirmed roles. Despite the uncertainties surrounding his professional relationship with Disney, Evans maintains a personal connection to the company and its properties. His visit to Disney World in January 2025, reported by Aliers.net, shows his continued affinity for the Disney experience as a fan, even as his future as a Disney actor remains unclear. When discussing his own inspirations and the figures who encouraged his career path, Evans credited his parents and local theater directors.
I mean, I'm very lucky. My parents were always really, really supportive. I had a couple good local theater directors when I was a kid, community theater and kids theater and things like that.
As of May 4th, 2025, Chris Evans' future with Disney remains largely speculative. While he has denied returning as Captain America, the possibility exists given past rumors, but current evidence leans toward no return. Star Wars offers a potential new chapter, with talks reported but no confirmation. Other Disney projects, like Pixar sequels, are not in development for him. His career trajectory, as seen in upcoming non-Disney projects, suggests a focus outside Disney, but his expressed interest in Disney's expansive franchises keep the door open for future collaborations. For fans of Evans' work with Disney, whether as Captain America or Buzz Lightyear, the coming months and years will likely bring clarity regarding his next steps with the entertainment giant. Until then, the actor's firm statements about being happily retired from the MCU and his diversification into non-Disney projects suggest a career in transition, one that may or may not include future collaborations with the house that Mickey built. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.